Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session on managing upwards. We're so lucky to have Richard Arkell from Navitas presenting today's webinar. Richard Arkell has been with Navitas for 10 years now. Last Saturday, he informed me, and he is currently leading a global shared initiative to improve performance and efficiency at Navitas. Richard is probably the best person to lead this webinar on managing upwards, which is also, we've been calling it manage your manager. And it sounds like a suspicious phrase, but it really is about working with your manager to obtain the best possible results for yourself, your manager, and your company. So over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Aparna. I'm very pleased to be here. I was saying to Aparna that just last Saturday I ticked over 10 years with Navitas, so there you go. The purpose of today's session is about managing upwards and understanding the key principles of that. But there's a little sub-purpose here, and I think you'll see this as we go through it. It's about what does it mean to be an effective manager? And so, interestingly, if you're a manager or not in your current role, if you understand more about what it means to be a manager, you'll understand a lot more about how to operate in any company environment. Let me give you a little bit of a history lesson for want of a better starting point. In 1990, an article was written for Harvard Business Review called Managing Your Boss. And so 25 years ago, these guys, John Gabaro and John Cotter, introduced this idea that, or this lens in which to view the manager-boss relationship. And it was one that sort of recognized the mutual dependence of participants. And they wrote this article in 1990, so throughout the 1980s they were doing research on this area, because in 1979, going a fair way back now, they realised that there was no management literature on this topic. There was an article by Peter Drucker, which I do actually reference in this talk, but it was from a long time prior to that, and it was the only article that they found that related to how to manage your boss. And in this article, Managing Your Boss, their basic insight was bosses need cooperation, reliability and honesty from their direct reports. Staff rely on bosses for making connections with the rest of the company, for setting priorities and obtaining resources. And if the relationship between you and your boss is rocky, then in some sense it's up to you to begin to manage it. And when you do take the time to cultivate a productive working relationship, is what they describe, by understanding your boss's strengths and weaknesses, priorities and even work styles, then everyone wins out. And so I think when you sort of unpack a lot of those ideas, mostly, and I'll come back to this a couple of times throughout the talk, it's about trust. And I think you'll see that that's pretty fundamental as we proceed. So the agenda for today is pretty straightforward. We're going to look at the key roles of a manager. We're going to think about what managing upwards means. And I've got two key ideas that I will speak to about this, and then a sort of a summary of some further thoughts. We have set aside an hour for this. I'm not sure that we'll take an hour to get through this, and we'll just see how we go. So let's start by thinking about the key roles of a manager. There are plenty of definitions around about the key roles of a manager, but I quite like this idea that there are 5 broad ideas. And as I mention these, as I work through them, perhaps you can just think about, if I can use the sort of idea of direction. What direction is a manager operating in when they're working on these roles? Are they sort of thinking about downwards with their staff, sideways with peers, or upwards with their boss? So the first key role is that managers need to meet the needs of the organisation and employees. I mean, at one level, that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? An organisation will normally have a position description for a manager, and that sort of tells you what the needs are of the organisation. You often find out the needs of your employees pretty quickly. But to be fair, the needs of organisations aren't always clear. They should be encapsulated through strategies and objectives and all those fine-sounding ideas. But you know, sometimes the manager needs to interpret those things, of course. But this is a pretty fundamental starting point. The second one is that they need to ensure that problems are solved. Again, a moderately sound and straightforward idea, although I do think about this at some detail when you're dealing with a problem. The point is, you're not just dealing with that single problem once. What you should be doing, of course, is dealing with it at a systemic level. And so you need to ensure that problems are solved, but actually that's often ensuring it's solved once and for all, not just once. The next idea is about ensuring that expectations are clear. Now, lack of clarity often is just about poor communication. You know, if you've worked in the English language sector for a long time, you know there's lots of models about how communication happens. But normally there's some process by which someone initiates communication, someone confirms that they've received that, and there's often a third step from the first party back to the second to affirm that they've received that confirmation of communication. So it is more complex than it might appear, but as a manager, your role is to initiate, confirm, and then seek more information if you need to around this point. The third is providing feedback. People need to know that they're doing good work. They need to know that they're doing the right work. And of course, when things are going badly, they need to know how to improve that. So that feedback step is, of course, very important. The last one is about managing processes, not tasks. It's very easy to slip into task mode and solve problems that you're good at solving, but of course you need to focus on the process. So I find this helpful as a sort of starting point. But as I've been talking about those things, if you've been thinking about them, the point is that managers need to provide and communication and deal with people in all directions. They need to operate down in terms of managing their team. They need to influence peers, people who are not their subordinates and people that they don't necessarily have direct control over. And lastly, and the topic for today, is they need to manage upwards. So let's think about what this means. What does it mean to manage upwards? The idea of managing upwards can be summarised in a moderately straightforward way. I think that managing upwards means, firstly, actively working with your manager. With is italicised because, of course, you shouldn't be working against your manager. You need to obtain, you manage upwards to obtain the best possible results for you, your team, and the organisation. And I think this is important. Sometimes you need to be an advocate for your team. You know, my experience is as soon as you're talking to someone 1 or 2 levels above your role, they have no idea what your team does, mostly. And you need to be a good advocate for them and to tell your manager about the great work that your team are doing. And I think this last point, which is key, is that managing upwards means applying a deliberate effort to communicate, understand different perspectives and cooperate. And you know, there's often lots of games that get played in organisations, especially large organisations. But this is, I guess, the important point about this is it's a deliberate effort. I might just pause for a second. If I could see you and you're all in groups and sitting next to each other, I would at this point give you an opportunity to think about a time when you've had conflict with a manager, and you know, just thinking about what the issue was. You know, is there something that you might have done or something that your boss might have done that might have changed the situation? And I'll just, maybe you could sort of think about that. I won't pause for too long because then it gets a little bit awkward, doesn't it? But maybe just think about that. You know, think about a time when you've had a bit of conflict with a manager. What was the issue and what might have changed the situation? Either something you might have done or something your boss might have done. Distance and time is often enables you to reflect better, and so maybe there's an opportunity for you to do that at this point. I will go on though, because I have come up with 2 key ideas, and I love this because you should even be able to remember this without even trying at the end of this session. I do note that if you do a little bit of a literature review, or you know, if you stick this into your favourite search engine, you'll come up with lots of topics like, you know, the top 13 ideas of how to manage your boss, or the best 10 steps to work with your manager, or whatever. But that's way too much to think about. So 2 key ideas is what I'm sticking with today. So the point about this is, the first point is that you never surprise your boss. And so this is very easily summarized as the art of no surprise, spoken as the art of no surprises. The second one, which is really important as well, which is help me to help you, or make it as easy as possible for your boss to make a decision. So to be effective in your role as a manager and thinking about managing upwards, no surprises, and help me to help you. Let's spend just a little bit of time unpacking these, and then I'll sort of close out with some other thoughts. So the first idea about never surprising your boss is never surprise your boss, but especially not in front of their boss or their peers. I think you know, depending on the sort of manager that you have, you don't want them to lose face in front of their colleagues and peers, and especially if your manager is in the same space as their manager and you give them some bad news or something they knew nothing about. That's generally not going to be taken particularly well. The second idea, and I think this is really, really important, maybe I should make it the first point, but if you've got some bad news to convey to your boss, make sure that they hear it from you. Don't let them hear about it from some secondary source. Here's a really important element. Don't let them hear about it from their own boss, because they might need to defend you. And if they don't know anything about it, then that makes it hard for them. And this goes back to sort of one of those key ideas of a manager. One of the key ideas is to support your team. And so your manager has got that key role as well to support their team, which is you. And so make sure that if you've got some bad news, they hear it from you. And I'll just reflect really briefly on a personal situation that I was in. We had a situation after we had acquired a company a number of years ago, and we had some issues with the regulator as a result of that acquisition. And I got a phone call from the regulator is when all of our CRICOS provision in the industry was state-based. I got a phone call from the regulator that indicated, it wasn't the first time I'd heard from them, but it was the time when they made it clear that they had a problem with something that we'd done. And so I happened to be physically on the same floor in the building as my boss, and as soon as I hung up from the phone, I walked down the office and I told them what was going on, walked down the corridor. So make sure your manager hears bad news from you. The third point here is about just respecting the org chart. This is about the art of not CCing the world. There's a bit of a problem with email, isn't it? It's very easy to tell lots of people the same information at the same time. I think don't go over your boss's head. Don't CC your boss's boss on an email without some level of, I guess, authority to do that. And sometimes, actually, this is a hard one. Sometimes, because this works downwards as well, sometimes you get an email from someone a couple of levels up and your manager might have missed out on that. Make sure you CC your boss on the reply. I just think there's a few little steps here that are just, when you think them through, you're sort of, they're just really pragmatic things to do so that you don't, in a sense, surprise your manager, getting back to the first bullet point on this page. Look, the last point in this area, if you've made a mistake, admit it and take responsibility, because ultimately your relationship with your boss is about trust, and just like have you heard this analogy that trust between people is like a bank account? I find this really helpful. It's almost like you've got a joint bank account between you and this other person, and what you need to be doing is be making deposits in that bank account on a regular basis, because at some point when you need to make a big withdrawal, you need to make sure there's enough credit in the bank account to cover the debit. And so you need to, over time, continuously build trust with your manager, so that if there's a problem, admit it, take responsibility, you've still got some a positive balance in that trust bank account. Okay, the next idea, key idea number 2, is about helping your manager to help you. Now, again, at some level, there's a bit of art here, not science, but there's an art to making your decision as easy as possible for your manager. I think this is really important, actually. If you've got a moderately complex issue that you need some decision taken above to get resolved, don't make your manager have to ask you for more information. Don't make them have to do their own research. And this is a really important one. Don't assume that they know as much about the situation as you do, or as much about that situation in general as you do. And so let me just walk back a little bit through this. I once had a manager write to me with quite a long email in a form that was almost, it wasn't quite stream of consciousness, but it was quite a long, sort of complex email. And literally at the end of the email, I had no idea what I was being asked to do. And so if you get that sort of email and you're quite time poor, what do you do? I know what I do. I just park it. I just leave it there, because you know what? It's too hard. And I've got a few other things that are on my plate today, and I'm just going to go and do them instead, because that's easier. So if you send something off to your manager and they've got to go off and Google the world to find out what the hell they should do about it, well, firstly, they probably won't be happy, and secondly, it's just going to slow things down. So try to anticipate the information that for someone who doesn't know as much about the topic as you do that they will need. In essence, you're the expert. I have this, I had to do a presentation about a project just a couple of weeks ago, and the simple fact was, in that room that I was presenting to, most of the people were superior, sort of superiors to me in an organisational structural sense. I knew more about the topic than any of them did, and so you've got a level of comfort about that. But secondly, you've got to unpack it and make sure that you give people the right information so that they can make the decision. The second component here, which is this concept of don't put the monkey on someone's back. Now, I'm just going to digress for a little bit, because there is this awesome Harvard Business Review article from 1974 that I've just got a little screen grab up there, and it's called Management Time, Who's Got the Monkey? It's referenced in the last slide of this pack. And it was published in 1974. And I don't know if this is the origin of the concept of a monkey on someone's back. Maybe it's not the origin, but it's a great article. And there's a couple of things that are sort of quite quaint when you look at it now, because firstly, it talks about managers and subordinates, which I have a little wry smile about, because of course these days we talk about teams and coaches, but this is about managers and subordinates. And there's this great little line about needing to request a memo from someone, and then the memo gets put in someone's in basket, and they pick it up out of their in basket and read it. And anyway, it's a great moment in time, I think. The point about this is you need to get your information together, provide solutions, not problems, make a recommendation, maybe discuss the range of options first, be clear on what they are, and make a recommendation. And then what you're asking is, of course, for your manager to make a decision. And so this is where the help me to help you really comes into play. If you don't put all this stuff together, what is it that you want? You want a decision. And if you don't put the information together in a way that makes it easy for the manager to make the decision, well, they probably won't, and then you'll get frustrated. And so the point about this article is it talks about how monkeys get transferred from one person to another. And there's this great little sort of analogy, or this scenario that's painted. And that is, a manager is walking down the corridor with one of his subordinates. Managers are always he in 1974, I think. The subordinate says, g'day, by the way, we've got a problem with blah, 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 blah. And they talk about it a little bit. And then at the end, the manager says, well, thanks for bringing that up. I'm in a bit of a rush right now, but let me think about it and I'll get back to you. And you see what's just happened? The subordinate had the problem, but the manager says, hang on, I can't solve it right now, but I'll get back to you. The monkey has just transferred from the subordinate to the manager. And the point about why that has happened is because the monkey got transferred because the manager knew enough to get involved, but didn't know enough to make a decision on the spot. So let's just replay that for a second. The subordinate says, I've got a problem. The manager says, oh, yeah, that's easy. What you need to do is X, Y, and Z. Okay? Monkey hasn't been transferred because the manager knew enough to make a decision on the spot. Here's a different scenario. Subordinate goes, blah, 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 I've got a problem. Manager says, I've got no idea. I've never come across that before. I'm sorry, I can't help you. Okay, monkey doesn't get transferred because the manager didn't know enough to get involved. So what you're trying to do, as I said, is get a decision. Therefore, don't transfer a monkey. Don't put it onto their back. Give them enough information so that they can make a decision. The last point here is sort of comes back to this trust thing as well. Maybe this is just me, and maybe I need to have some counselling about this, but frankly, if I get a document in front of me that looks poorly laid out, not structured particularly well, it's got typos or errors, you know, in the text, I actually struggle to trust that the right amount of thought and preparation has been applied to that. And so I then start to worry about the soundness of the recommendation. And so, like I say, that might just be me, but make your documentation as easy to read as possible. Make it look neat. I don't know, whatever the styles are that your organisation adheres to, follow them. I think this is especially a problem with numerical analysis. If you print out a spreadsheet, you've got no way, apart from getting out your calculator and doing the calculations, to assure yourself that the actual cells that sit behind the calculations are doing the right thing. And so if it looks rubbish, then I'll probably expect that the thinking is rubbish. Anyway, like I say, this may be revealing more about me than anyone else, but my theory always is when I'm putting documentation up to my manager, I want to make it as easy as possible for them to make a decision, so I make it look good. So that's in a nutshell the two key ideas, the art of no surprises and help me to help you. So I do have a couple of other things that sort of come out along the way when you're thinking about these ideas, and that is I think a really simple framework for decision making when you need someone else to make a decision for you is to describe the problem, describe the issues, and make a recommendation. And I know how basic that seems, but if you go and have a look at internal communications that bounce around your organisation, that is not always what you see. And so this, I think, goes back to the key roles of a manager. If you're about making sure that problems are solved, making sure that expectations are clear, managing processes, all those things that we talked about early on, then you just need to make this process for decision making as simple as possible. The second idea is about the concept of learning styles. Now, if you're an educational professional, this is probably right up your alley, but everyone has a slightly different way of learning. And essentially, it helps to know what your manager's learning style is. And so in the article by, this article by Peter Drucker about managing oneself, he makes the, and I haven't read it for a little while, but he tells a story about an American president who, one particular president, absorbed long memos written to him about a particular issue, and he was very good at reading that, that information, absorbing it, learning it, making a decision. So when the next president came along, who was someone, and that wasn't their learning style, the bureaucracy took some time to catch up. They'd produce all these long documents laying out particular issues, and the president wouldn't do anything about it. And so the point is, they might be a reader or a listener, or they might learn in different ways. And so you need to work this out actually for your manager. You sort of need to work it out for yourself. I'll disclose to you that I learn by talking. So I don't know what that means at one level, but I'd much prefer to sit down and have a discussion with someone, and that will clarify. And if I've got the opportunity to clarify that, then I will learn much more quickly by doing that rather than reading or maybe other forms. There's another point here, which is that it sort of helps to know your manager's hot buttons, what's going on at the moment in your organisation that they're going to be particularly sensitive to, because if you need to get a decision out of someone and it's right, the issue is smack bang in the middle of some particular organisational issue at the moment, well, maybe it's going to take a little bit longer to get that rather than not. So, what's going on for your boss? What are the important issues? What are they concerned about? And how do you assist in that process? And so, finally, I think this is what I've been saying all along, really. It's about trust. And so if you are doing a whole bunch of these things and staying on top of, what are the issues for your manager, what are their hot buttons at the moment, knowing what their learning styles are and working within that framework, then you will continue to build trust, going back to that bank account concept. And you should always have a positive balance in your trust account. And so if you thought about a time in the past where you had a particularly difficult circumstance with one of your managers, I wonder if any of these ideas, when you reflect back, would have changed that scenario for you. I know I was once working for a manager that it took me a while to work out that for them, one particular area, it was about marketing in this case, was a key, that's where they sort of resonated. If they sort of saw an issue, they would see it pretty much through the prisms of what was going on from a marketing perspective. And so once I worked those things out, I just had the opportunity to frame things in that dimension. And so it took me a while to work that out over a matter of months. And once I did, not that it solved every problem on earth, but it just helped in that particular circumstance. So I wonder if there are, if you think back to any of those situations, what that looks like for you. And thinking about, the sort of concept of being an effective manager. If you go all the way back to those ideas of managing the needs of the organisation and employees, making sure problems are solved, ensuring that expectations are clear, providing feedback and managing process, you can see how dealing with the art of no surprises and helping me to help you, having those concepts in your mind, will help you to be a more effective manager. And so there are some ideas contained here in the references. Those 3 Harvard Business Reviews are the ones that I was talking about. You may be able to get copies of them off the HBR website, depending on what their status is. I did get, it's quite old now, but that 2004 there was a series of web research articles in Slacker Manager, which I love the idea of being a Slacker manager, but anyway, that were very helpful as well. So in terms of other things that you could look at, if you wanted to have a look at those management articles, they're pretty helpful. So, Aparna, I told you we wouldn't need an hour. We've just ticked over 35 minutes. I'm very happy to take any questions or whatever process you wanted to do at this point.
Thank you so much, Richard. Attendees, if you have any questions for Richard on any of the points discussed today, please feel free to type them in now. Richard, just to start off the discussion, I had a question about learning styles. With your manager, do you recommend having a discussion with them about how best they communicate, or is that a bit awkward and strange to do?
Actually, it's really easy to do if you do it early. You know what I mean? If you've just been appointed into a role and you've got a new manager, it's a really easy thing to do. If you've been working for them for 12 months, it just gets a little bit more awkward, doesn't it?
Yep.
So, boss, I've been working with you now for 12 months. How would you like me to prepare these reports for you? Or, you know, what's the best way to... So, actually, at one level, genuine and open discussion is always the best thing. If you can do that early on in your working relationship, then, of course, that I think that makes the most sense.
Well, there's
So,
quite a
yep,
few.
I'd encourage that.
Thanks, Richard. I think there's quite a few articles out now about how to watch out for the evil boss when you're being recruited. I mean, so it's almost like a reverse interview, asking, trying to find out about the person who's potentially your line manager at the interview stage. Is that what you're referring to?
Oh, I actually meant after you'd been appointed, but of course the concept of due diligence of your of an employment offer is not just about you know, how much is the salary, you know, do I get a good you know, nice view out the window.
Yeah.
I would always encourage people to do due diligence on who will be their boss, and there's, because of the beautiful thing that is LinkedIn, there's plenty of ways you can do that now.
Yep. Thanks.
And
Thanks.
so that could, so in terms of your due diligence, it could be that one of the questions could be, you know, tell me about them and how they are to work for, and, you know, what are their picadillos or blah, blah, blah.
Yep. Yep. Richard, we have a quick question about the full version of the text for some of the articles links you provided. Would you have copies to scan and share with us, or I could do a search and share them as well?
Do you know what? I have copies. Here's a little technical thing. I don't know about the intellectual property rights of the copies that I have. I subscribe to HBR, so I've got copies of them. I don't know if legally I can just distribute them. I'm happy to find that out, and Arpana, maybe that's something we could do together.
Sure. I'm just waiting for more questions to come in. And if there is nothing else at the moment, we might wrap up soon, but I might just give it a minute. Well, I did have another question because I think I might have surprised my boss today, and I don't think he would have liked it too much. One of the things is the fine balance between having more information than your boss might have, and communicating this information in a group situation, for example. How do you tread the fine line between being a little know-it-all and saving your boss's image?
Yeah, do you know what? Actually, this is a really hard one because, you know, you don't have an infinite amount of time, and often the time pressure with your boss to, you know, debrief them prior to some public forum, you know, maybe it just doesn't even exist. There's a couple of little techniques, aren't there? You know, you might want to just, you know, send them an email or you know, some message prior to the meeting. Just say, by the way, I've got a bit of stuff that I need to talk about as blah blah blah, and, you know, if you want to, if we need to, we can organise some time beforehand. That would be the most sort of fundamental way to go about doing it. If you've got it contained in a report, of course you can drop the report into their inbox before you go into the meeting and say you might want to have a look at this before we go. There's all those sorts of issues. I have a funny, I've had a little internal conflict here when I think about these situations. Part of your role as a manager is to manage difficult situations, and at some level you don't want to involve your boss in it if you're going to sort it out yourself. You know what I mean there? And so there's this sort of scenario, you can see a scenario developing, you think that you've got a way to handle it, you don't want to worry your boss, you want to sort of just get it sorted, and maybe you might tell them later. There's that internal tension that I feel between that and almost telling them too much information, where they then get a bit, you know,
Confused, or
just
they don't know what
annoyed,
you want.
you know.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a challenge, and maybe that's just where you need to be checking in with your boss about, you know, those things on a sort of a shorthand, quick way before you dump a whole bunch of stuff onto them.
Yep. Richard, thank you so much for that. And also thank you so much to our attendees who made time to attend this webinar. The slideshow and the recording from this webinar will be available in our members only section of the website. And I will be communicating with you when those are up. And of course, a special thanks to Richard for coming and sharing his experience and insights on managing managers. Richard, thank you so much.
That's quite all right.
Thanks, everyone, and see you next time, which will be in January, by the way, on the 21st. We have our next leadership webinar with Andy Hockley, who is the lead trainer on the Iddleton course. Hope to see most of you there. So thank you, everyone, and see you later.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thanks.